In the next 4 years, the current administration wants every American wearing a device that tracks their biological health 24/7. And they're calling this healthcare, but I'm calling it the most sophisticated surveillance system that has ever been built on American soil. And I just have got to talk about it with someone because what I'm about to show you is deeply unsettling.
It appears there's a China biotech gold rush as U.S. investors and pharma giants, they look to the world's second largest economy in a new quest for new drugs and new remedies.
Imagine a world where your clothing monitors your health.
We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it into a single, if you will, unified data platform.
We think that wearables are a key to the MAHA agenda, making America healthy again.
Okay, so here's what happened. RFK Jr. recently announced that HHS, which is the Department of Human Health and Services, is launching one of the biggest marketing campaigns in its history. And the goal of that campaign, apparently, is to get every American wearing a device that constantly monitors your biological data. We're talking about a $500 million PR campaign using your money to convince you to voluntarily just hand over the most intimate data about your body. Like the amount of funding that has recently, like over the last month, just flooded the markets for biotech wearables especially, is just insane. But before we get too deep into legislation and contracts and the billions of dollars that are being spent to surveil you, we should probably start by talking about what it is biotechnology is. The TLDR here is that biotechnology is basically using living systems like DNA and proteins to solve problems. So instead of making a drug in a chemical factory, you might program bacteria to produce that drug. And biotech wearables are the consumer-facing version of this. And we're not just talking about your grandma's Fitbit here, okay? They're devices that use biological monitoring to track everything your body is doing throughout the day, like non-stop. We're talking about devices that track your heart rate variability, stress hormones, blood sugar levels, your sleep patterns, basically everything that your body is doing to regulate throughout the day. And let me be clear about something. The technology itself really can save some lives. Truly, these devices can detect heart problems before you feel any symptoms. They've helped diabetics manage their conditions, like catch sleep disorders that would go undiagnosed for years otherwise. And all of that sounds amazing, right? Like technology helping get people healthier. That's the dream. But the dream starts turning into a nightmare pretty quick, like one with a sleep paralysis demon in the corner named RFK Jr. When you start digging around who's actually building the infrastructure for this tech and where the money's coming from. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and what I found genuinely concerned me, but I feel like we need to talk about it because I'm not hearing anybody else talk about it. And if we're going to talk about funding, then we can't do it without bringing up HR 1. I'm so sorry. I know we're all tired of it. If you don't know what HR 1 is, yes you do. It's the big beautiful bill. First, it cuts funding from places that you'd think we'd be investing in, considering the biotech wearables of it all. It's like $18 billion is slashed from NIH, which is our main agency for medical research. The CDC was cut by more than half, the FDA lost 40%, 20,000 healthcare workers were either fired or forced into retirement. Now what they did increase are things like over $6 billion for biometric entry and exit systems, you know, at the border as part of national security. A lot of other huge investments in border surveillance technologies as well. Lots of funding for information technology, basically tracking infrastructure. And of course, RFK Jr.'s $500 million campaign to get wearables on everybody. There's also $50 billion that's earmarked for something called rural health transformation. But here's the catch. To access that money, the states have to provide things like consumer-facing technology and remote monitoring tools as a majority of what the spending goes towards. In plain English, that basically means no hospitals, no ambulances, no doctors. If states want the money, they have to use tech, mostly wearables, to monitor people from a distance. So they're taking away $155 billion in care and then giving back $50 billion in technology care and saying like, look, we're helping. This is you getting an upgrade. That's like me taking an entire pizza away from you and then in exchange just giving you one pepperoni back and then telling you it's an upgrade. Oh, and that one pepperoni is also going to watch you sleep at night. Like, this is not healthcare. It's a bait and switch. They're so clearly coercing states into building surveillance infrastructure by forcing them to choose between either no funding or funding that comes with a lot of strings attached. So we keep talking about infrastructure, the surveillance infrastructure being built and all the funding that's going towards it, but who is actually building the infrastructure? Now, I'll warn you, this is where it's going to start feeling like a sci-fi novel because we're about to talk about Oracle. Now, you might know Oracle as just a boring old regular schmegular company company that stores data, right? But what most people don't know is that Oracle actually started as a CIA project. Like, the name Oracle, it came from the project itself, which was called Oracle. The goal was for Larry Ellison to make this all-seeing system for intelligence agencies, and it just kind of stuck from there. Now look, Oracle goes all the way back to this 1970s, and a lot of shady stuff went on with the CIA and Larry Ellison, and that's probably a whole other video for a whole other time. But keeping it focused for this video, when you fast forward to today, Oracle recently acquired Cerner, one of the largest electronic health record companies in the US. Like, they bought it for $28 billion, I think a year ago, which means that they now control an enormous portion of American medical data. And their track record for protecting that kind of data is actually terrifying. On January 22nd, 2025, like this year, hackers had breached into Oracle's health servers and stole patient data, like names, social security numbers, full medical histories. And Oracle didn't discover it for almost a month. When the healthcare companies approached Oracle and was like, hey, I think all of our patients' data was compromised, Oracle denied it. Straight up was like, that did not happen. Like, oh, we just got reached out, a hacker just got in contact with us and said that they have all of our patients' data, and Oracle's like, nope, couldn't have been our data. I don't know what you're talking about. And they delayed notifying all of these hospitals for nearly 3 months. Like, patients had to wait, 90 days before they were able to actually take any action on their social security and private medical data being stolen. And remember, that was data protected by HIPAA. The wearable data that we're talking about now, that's not protected at all. All of that data is considered consumer data because you're using a consumer device. So it's the terms of service that they have to be compliant to, and they get to make those up. When you read Apple's privacy policy, specifically for the health data, it says pretty clearly that they can share your data for national security or law enforcement purposes. And don't expect any regulators to stop it, okay? I mean, on the Democratic side, I don't even feel like they fully understand what this tech does and how deep this goes and how vulnerable that information is. And on the other side, the same government pushing this agenda is the one in charge of enforcing it. And that's the fox guarding the hen house. Like, good luck. For instance, I don't think people realize how much data is already being collected on them, even without wearables. Like, grab your iPhone if you have one. Grab it right now. Go to your app that says health, the white one with the little heart in the corner. Now I'm going to share my screen with you, okay? But follow along on your own. The first thing you're probably going to notice is that I have an alert under my summary that says health data not synced, and you probably don't. That's because I turned mine off when I first got my phone. But if you don't know to turn it off, then automatically all of your health data is syncing to an iCloud. Now look at just how granular this data tracking really is. As you can see, up until 2 days ago, it's been tracking my steps, mostly because I didn't know you could turn that off, because when I went to turn off my not syncing stuff and turn off all the other ones, it didn't give me the option to turn steps off. So I just assumed it was a part of location tracking. You're also gonna have your steps tracked, because I didn't think that you could get that much information from my steps anyways. But you see that little button that says show all health data? Yeah, click on that. When you scroll down a little bit, past the steps part, you start seeing things like double support time. I'm sorry, come again, is the percentage of time during a walk which both feet are on the ground. So it's literally measuring how much weight I put on each foot when I walk. How? What? So I got 2% for walking asymmetry. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's basically analyzing whether or not I walk lopsided. And fun fact, I do. A lot of the time, okay? Because I have arthritis in my big toe, but how does it know? That's the crazy part. This is all coming from my phone being in my pocket. I cannot stress enough, I don't have an Apple Watch. I don't wear an Oura ring. How does it know with my phone being in my pocket the length of my stride? I mean, it's insane. And if you click the browse button in the corner at the bottom, you'll see all of these health categories, right? That you can click, and it wants you to either turn on or fill out. Literally, you click other data, alcohol consumption, blood alcohol content, blood glucose, hand washing, inhaler usage, time in daylight, mental well-being, anxiety risk, depression risk, exercise minutes, mindful minutes. Log your emotions and moods. Oh, for fuck's sake. And so I went back to settings to see if I could figure out how to turn the steps off, and maybe you'll see something that says get help during an emergency with a big red 1 next to it. You click it, learn about emergency SOS, and set up medical ID, which is basically just the health app with all of your health records and those files uploaded to it. Like, they really, really want this health information more than I do. Please, 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 if there's nothing else you take away from this video, just remember this. No matter how much the terms of service for whatever biotech wearable that you're about to buy says that they're going to protect your data, it's different than the other data. They're going to put it in a special place with all these extra protections. They've got your back. They don't have your back. I don't care if they promise on their grandmother's grave that they're going to protect your data. They're not. Now let's talk about who's analyzing that data. If you haven't already, then I'd like to introduce you to Palantir. So Palantir was literally founded for more or less the same reason as Oracle as well, like with CIA money to build systems that tracked people. And you know how Oracle was named after the CIA project that they were initially hired to work on? Yeah, well, Palantir's name comes from the magical stones in Lord of the Rings that let you spy on everyone. So they're very similar companies, but designed for very distinctly different reasons. So like, think about it like this. Oracle stores your health data, financial data, social media activity, geolocation, all of it, right? Palantir, on the other hand, is building a bunch of software that connects the dots of all of that data, right? So drawing patterns and predictions about you. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, but just because they can track all of this data doesn't mean that they're going to use it that way, right? But the thing is, unfortunately, they already have. And by they, I mean Larry Ellison and Oracle, because back in 2012, during the NATO protests in Chicago, Oracle had deployed a tool called Endeca. It was basically this software that aggregated all this data that was combining like 911 calls, police records, and public data with protester tweets, social media activity to just track all of these people at these protests in real time. And apparently, at the height of the protests, police were able to scan over 20,000 tweets per hour, and the software would flag anything that sounded angry or critical for further monitoring. And that was back in 2012. Oh my god. So cooked, dude. So cooked. And Oracle didn't try to hide any of this, like at all. They were bragging about it. They kept calling it a pioneering moment in real-time police tracking. Like, if you know anything about Larry Ellison, you know that he just creams himself thinking about surveillance technology. I mean, you give him a George Orwell book and he says, give me a few minutes in the bathroom, you know? And the worst part is they used that as like a little case study. They packaged it and pitched it to China. Literally used Chicago protests as a sales deck for authoritarian surveillance. A China-based Oracle engineer at a developer conference at the company's California headquarters in 2018 had, I guess, given the presentation at this conference and hosted the slides from that presentation on Oracle's website. And journalists were able to find it before it was taken down. Oracle has also boasted that its data security services were used by other Chinese police entities, according to the documents, including police in Xinjiang. And if you know anything about Xinjiang, you know that it's the site of genocide against Muslim, Uyghurs, and other ethnic groups. What may have started as just social media tracking has transformed into this behavioral tracking and now biometric surveillance. In China today, Oracle's infrastructure still helps power their infamous social credit system. And it's no longer just about what people say online, it's about what their bodies are doing. Your stress levels, your heart rate variability, your sleep cycles, all of that biological data suggesting if you're agitated, sick, or non-compliant affects your score. Now, there's not a lot we know about the social credit system other than what has kind of leaked through the press because they keep it pretty airtight over there. But what we do know is that score oftentimes dictates to the everyday person in China whether or not they could buy a train ticket, apply for a job, or even get their kids into a good school. And I'll say it, COVID-19 was a really great way for them to soft launch that system. Let's rewind to 2020 for a second, because during COVID, most people voluntarily shared sensitive health data in the name of public safety. It was a great way to test how much information people were willing to give up if you gave them a good enough reason to do so. And it wasn't like the government that was asking for it, right? It was apps, it was employers, it was airlines. And you may think to yourself, well, I would never, I don't care, COVID or otherwise, there's no way I would put that information in. But the reality is that people complied because it was framed as like a moral duty, you know, a necessity. If you don't input that information into these apps, then you are possibly harming someone else in allowing them to get sick. That's on you. And in many cases, it was framed as a temporary measure, right? Like, this is just during COVID, and then after COVID, it'll be gone, right? None of these apps will matter anymore. But in places like Singapore, temporary turned into permanent pretty quickly. The data collected for public health, which was promised to only be used for public health, was almost immediately repurposed for criminal investigations. And now, when I look around, I feel like we're building the infrastructure to do that same thing. Now, you might be thinking at this point, like, okay, well, stop for a second. At the end of the day, they can't force me to wear anything. Right? I mean, this is still America, after all. I don't have to wear a watch. I don't have to wear a ring. I don't have to wear anything that they give me. And that is true for now. Here's how it actually ends up working, right? Instead of forcing you, they just make it incredibly expensive to not comply. And what people don't realize is that this is already happening. Major insurance companies like John Hancock now offer policies where your premium is partly based on data from your fitness tracker. No, I wish I was kidding. I promise I wish I was kidding. They call it behavioral underwriting. You get a discount for sharing your data, but what they're really doing is penalizing people who don't want to be monitored 24/7. And believe you me, employers are getting in on this too, because many companies now offer voluntary workplace wellness programs where basically you can get lower health insurance costs if you meet certain fitness goals tracked through wearables. But here's the thing about using the term voluntary, when referring to these programs, because when not participating costs you hundreds of dollars a year, when you're already not getting paid a decent salary and your job is threatened by AI, how voluntary is this voluntary program really? This is economic coercion, plain and simple. You technically have a choice, but one option costs significantly more money. I don't know, the plan seems pretty clear to me. Start with incentives, then gradually make the non-monitored option so expensive that people can't afford it. Eventually, biological monitoring becomes the default, and opting out becomes something only wealthy people can afford. Or, if not that, then we're going to go ahead and defund and deregulate all of the other options, like, the Rural Health Transformation Program, and give you so few options that it's either biotech wearables or drive 3 hours to a hospital to get your glucose monitored. So what happens when you have real-time biological data on millions of Americans? Like, when you can track not just where people go, but how their bodies respond to stress, what makes their heart spike, and when they're not sleeping well, what does all of that mean? You can predict a lot of behavior from that information. And not just like what somebody might buy, but how they might vote, whether or not they're likely to quit their job, if they're becoming politically active. This isn't just a science fiction far out scenario. Companies are already using heart variability rates to predict employee turnover. That's when Palantir comes in, and that's the data integration that they're specializing in. And with that level of data and that level of optimization and organization, you're not just looking at healthcare anymore. You're looking at full population control. The ability to influence behavior on a massive scale by predicting and responding to biological patterns before people are even consciously aware of them. Listen, I've been following this biotech wearables beat for quite some time now. For the past 7 months, I've been writing about it extensively and just keeping an eye on how it's all shaping up and how my nemesis, Larry Ellison, almost definitely has everything to do with it. I started this investigation asking whether we're building healthcare technology or surveillance infrastructure. After following the money, seeing all the contracts, looking at the history, looking at what all the other countries are doing, I think the answer is pretty clear. They're not building this to make you healthier. They're not empowering you by giving you full control over your health. They're building this because biological data is the new oil. It's the most valuable resource in the digital economy, and whoever controls it controls the future. And if biological data is the new oil and wearables are the drill, then that just makes you dinosaur bones at this point. That's pretty cool, actually. Look, the companies that are getting these contracts, Oracle, Palantir, they're not healthcare companies. They're surveillance companies. They're CIA, DOD companies through and through. The programs getting funded aren't about medical research or disease prevention. They're about data collection and behavioral monitoring. And they're going to try to convince us that sharing our most intimate biological data is somehow patriotic, healthy, and forward-thinking. Like, I've already heard from multiple influencers with huge followings that they've been approached many a times to promote wearables in a very, pro-America way. So the next time you see your favorite creator raving about their new fitness tracker and how empowered it makes them feel, it's worth bearing in mind and asking yourself, is this sponsored content or is it taxpayer-funded propaganda? And look, I can't predict how all of this is going to turn out. I'm not an oracle, right? But I can promise you one thing. Once this data is collected, once these systems are built, the uses will far expand whatever they've promised us. Because when the cost of opting out becomes unaffordable, it was never really a choice in the first place. Remember, once you're inside a system designed to optimize for population control rather than protect individuals, you're no longer a patient. You're a data point, modeled for control, optimized for capital. But the choice is still ours right now. But not for long.